What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit that like button and let me know what you think of today's discussion in the comment section below. If you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet, or you're living under a rock and seeing this video for the first time, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another Sit Down video. If you're listening to us currently on iTunes, Spotify, or any other podcast platform, welcome in as well. Please leave us a detailed review and a 5-star rating. What's up, everybody, and welcome in. This is episode 211 of the Sit Down, and I'm your host, Jeff Nadu. And organized crime, as usual, is the topic here today. And it's not the mafia we're talking about. Today we're talking about cartels, and there's a lot going on right now in the cartel world. If I told you that the sons of El Chapo might just be cooperating with the federal government, would you believe me? We're going to talk about all that and more. What's going on in Sinaloa right now? What's going on with CJNG? What's going on? Can Donald Trump actually stamp out the cartels? I'll tell you why I don't think it'll ever happen, and it has very little to do with Trump, to be fair. We're going to do it, though, today with one of my favorite people on social media. He does an unbelievable job. He goes by All Source News on Twitter, but his name is actually Stefano Rittendale, former Army. I believe, maybe he could tell us. He's in the Army. He was at the border. He did all sorts of great intelligence work down there. He's working on some new projects. And to be fair, he is one of the best people you can follow. This is a guy who I think, Stefano, you've been in Twitter Spaces with Elon Musk, haven't you? I mean, you've done some pretty great work.
I mean, I kind of exploded a lot on Twitter and through some of the accounts like Mario Naval. I do a lot of work with them and help them out. So, I wish more of those Twitter Spaces were cartel focused or more just general and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm Stefano Rittendale. That's Jeff. Jeff and I have known each other for a very long time now, years. We've always DM each other, interact, and kind of share information. I go by All Source News. I'm on X and Blue Sky. And then I recently kind of just last week expanded on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram to try to give a lot of those more coverage. And as my bio says, I'm also the Chief Intelligence Officer of Artorias Tech. We're a AI data-driven company that focuses on intelligence, news, and information. We do a lot of data aggregation. And we are actually happy to announce that we recently launched an app called SitRep. It's available on Apple and Android. And for your listeners, for example, why does this app might be interest of you? It's a subscription-based monthly, $9.99. A lot of our competitors charge tens of thousands of dollars. And it's really good because it gives you news and analysis on over 180 countries, but more importantly, topics and tags that we have already curated. And one of them, we call it cartel activity, which is actually just something that you do a lot because it's not just cartels, it's mafia, gangs, organized crime, cartel, drugs, this entire underworld of criminality. We provide the latest information on those countries and those topics. And we're really happy to announce it. And Jeff, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you came on. And I'm glad you made that, that discussion that you have. It's not just cartel stuff. It's not just Ecuador, South America, or Mexico. You're reporting on things going on in Italy and Haiti and really everywhere. And if you like organized crime, All Source News, your app, I'm going to link all that in the description. Perfect. Especially just because this is such an interesting nexus, an interesting world. There's a lot going on right now in Mexico. And that's, I think, really your specialty. Mm-hmm. Not that you have one specialty, but it's definitely specialty. Before we get into it, though, just give a little background on like I started the mob stuff just because I had interest in it. I was never in that cohort. I was never in the policing world or the DEA or FBI. It's just a hobby. You, though, are someone who had a rich background in intelligence. You do also a really good job, I think, in general, which is geopolitics, kind of how the world works in terms of, organized crime, the drug trade. How did you kind of get the intelligence? You were in the military.
Yeah. So I graduated from the Merchant Marine Academy in 2013. It's one of the 5 service academies. And I commissioned Army and started my career as an armor officer. long story short, although I never officially, actually, that's a very long story, but I'll spare everybody the details. I ended up being what's called an S2, an intelligence officer for a battalion. It was an MP battalion in El Paso, the 93rd Military Police Battalion. I was their S2 before I transitioned out of active duty and went reserves. And although I never was like officially certified as an MI officer, I had a long experience of kind of the intelligence background from all the like previous positions. And while I was in the 93rd MP battalion, what happened was I did various like training missions overseas, but one of them was specifically I did 4 weeks in Mexico, where it was me and a couple, another officer and a couple NCOs. We went down to Mexico, trained the Mexican military for 4 weeks. One of the best Army experiences I've ever had. It was phenomenal. And, talking to the Mexicans, that they would tell us, obviously we were there to train them because they've been fighting a war back then when I went, which was 2018, like 12 years against the cartels. And actually a lot of the training we did is they wanted our lessons learned from Iraq and Afghanistan, specifically like IEDs, because they started to notice an increase of that. So we kind of really molded our training to make sure they were prepared. And then I did the border mission under the first Trump administration in 2018. And, my focus, because, I was the S2, for those who don't know, military intelligence personnel, we're not allowed to do any collection or intelligence work inside the U.S. or U.S. citizens. It's like a big red X, no, like big no. So, when I was at the border, my focus then was south. We had the caravan. And so I was like, okay, well, let's focus down south. Let's focus everything Mexico. So that became, cartel activity, human smugglers, actual caravan, the migrants. And those kind of two positions and kind of my obsession with OSINT already kind of then transformed into this idea in March of 2021 to create this account, All Source News. And I realized that there was a lot of great OSINT tools and accounts, but none of them were focusing on Mexico. There was great Mexican OSINT accounts that were doing a lot of great work in Mexico, but it never broke through. And so my idea was at the beginning was to be kind of this bridge, and then it kind of morphed more into, now my own work, my own reporting. Now I got sources, and it kind of just continued to evolve. And after my time in the reserves as a DoD contractor, now I'm the chief intelligence officer of Artorias. And, we, as you said, we have global things, not only just war around the world, but economic health and everything, but my intelligence background and how I did sources, collections, et cetera, and all that kind of enabled me to be in the position that I'm in. And I think the cartel one, what I would tell people is I think it gets very oversimplified. And I'm hoping that with my account and opportunities like this is to kind of educate kind of those complex natures of Mexican cartels, because it's a very convoluted, complex issue.
It is. And people just kind of know it on the forefront of and they make it like this, the cartel, like it's this big group of people. And like, you ever hear that kind of phrase? And it's like, no, there's dozens of cartels, and they all run in different areas. And they all beef with others. Some have factions inside cartels that beef. There's all sorts of things. And I think there's such a need, at least for you. And I've noticed this on like TikTok, Instagram, and building the following that I've had. Some of my most viewed videos, I'm talking millions of views, are about drug cartels, right? People are very interested in them. They have this thought that they know about them because they've watched. And at the end of the video or the interview today, I want to do a couple of rapid fire questions about.
Go for it.
Like these goofy shows they put on about these things and kind of what's real and what isn't. But, I think another thing about cartels that I find interesting, and I've heard other people discuss this, is this is all happening in real time, right? Like this is a country very close to us that is completely lawless for the most part, that has been overtaken by very powerful people that are in a business that is a global multi-billion, if not, I want to say $1 trillion industry, but it's a huge industry. And I think people like you, there's just very few that are doing it at such a high level. And I know for a while you were even anonymous. I remember I tried to get you on to speak before, and you were anonymous. And again, this isn't the mob where in the 70s they were dangerous and now you don't really got to worry too much. Drug cartels are drug cartels, but I want to get into what's happening right now. And you do a great job of doing that. Check out All Source News. Check out, and the app's going to be, I think, a game changer because, people just don't know where to go to get this information. I know, Luis Chaparro does a nice job. There's a few others, but, very few are doing it in real time, which is great. I think the big story is at least over the last 6 months to a year, is the apprehension of Ishmael and Mayo Zambada, who, I think, when we look back to the overarching start of drug cartels, you got to go all the way back to the Guadalajara group, and he was a part of that. If we've watched these TV shows, I think what I found interesting about the El Mayo stuff is it kind of put to bed the, let's just be honest, rumor in some circles that how in 50 years of drug trafficking has he never been arrested, right? I think a lot of people really wondered, is he an asset? Is he, I guess my thought is explain the situation, who he is.
Yeah. So what I would say, I mean, it's the rumor. I mean, like any rumor, right? There has to be a hint of truth in some way, shape, or form, because that's the point. Let's look at Mayo Zambada. Who was he under? El Chapo. How many times was El Chapo captured? How many times was Mayo? And the difference between El Chapo and Mayo Zambada is that Mayo Zambada was never even close to being captured.
That's my thing. Yeah.
It was this kind of. It was like, wait a minute, everybody else is kind of running around afraid, or they try to get an operation, or at least you hear, like, for example, with El Mencho now, right? Oh, they tried to get him, right? And they were successful, et cetera, right? Like, there's operations directly targeting El Mencho, El Chapo capture and escaping prisons and all that. Mayo, nothing. Zero. Nada. It's funny because I think the only time he ever got close to being quote unquote captured was a complete accident where he got stopped by a traffic cop who had no idea who he was. That's obviously like that's it. And so that's where kind of this myth of Mayo Zambada and even some of the conversation was, well, is El Chapo really the most powerful man in the Sinaloa cartel, or is it Mayo Zambada? And I think it's important for your listeners to kind of understand the operation to capture Mayo Zambada was insane. It was an insane thing that not even Sicario 3 could have come up with, or Hollywood. Right. Basically, what happened is the U.S. government managed to turn one of El Chapo's son, there it is, Joaquin Guzman, right there on their screen, basically made him into an informant. I'm told by like the people I talked to in the government and my sources and all that, they said it was an FBI operation. Like this was FBI. The FBI managed to turn Joaquin Guzman, the son, into an informant, and the son basically tricked El Mayo into boarding a plane. He said was to check some property or something of interest in Chihuahua, which is south of Texas. He said, "Hey, get on the plane with me. Let's go." But instead of the plane landing in Chihuahua, it landed basically outside of El Paso, Texas, where there were federal agents who detained him. I mean, it was an insane concept of operation.
I always laughed when it was speculation on did they actually cooperate? It's like, well, no, they were just waiting there at random, right? Like, of course he was. Like, how would they have known he was coming? Of course they were waiting.
Well, they made the son of El Chapo an informant,
yeah,
right? And there's speculations as to why, and I think that's always been. And you probably won't really know, right? But this kind of matched the time when Ovidio Guzman. Ovidio Guzman was captured there he is. That's the famous image when he was extradited to, I believe that's the flight he went to Chicago first, when he was extradited. So Ovidio Guzman was captured in January of 2023 by the Mexican authorities, the second time they went after him, flown in. And so this was kind of the time when this big case against Ovidio Guzman. And so he was inside the United States where the conversations were happening that, okay, there was rumors of kind of this tension between Los Chapitos and Mayo Zambada. But the thing about Mayo Zambada, I think most people don't realize is for the most part, I mean, let's use the standard of cartels that are very violent, all right? I'm not trying to say they're not. But Mayo Zambada, especially now, was kind of more of this, let's just keep the peace, right? Mm-hmm. Like he made it to the pinnacle of power. He wasn't necessarily interested in more. Like he made it. Like he was untouchable. He was almost in cartel world like this, specifically within his faction of the Sinaloa cartel, like a revered leader, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look at Mayo Zambada's groups and their propaganda and what they push, I mean, he was very well respected and adored. And so from Mayo Zambada's perspective, it's like, okay, he was more interested in trying to maintain the calm and peace, and if violence happened within the Sinaloa cartel, to try to quash it and then kind of focus on other groups like CJ&G is a perfect example, like in Zacatecas or other rivals, right? But within the Sinaloa cartel aspect, he was more interested in maintaining the federation. So when he was captured and sent to the U.S., right? What was really interesting is that the Mayo Zambada organization quickly went around and solidified their support for the son, Mayito Flaco, the son of Mayo Zambada. There he is. He was the key guy that everybody quit, and it was very quick, right? I tracked the miles because I was wondering, okay, are we going to see a split or a break? Generally, kind of when you see a leadership fall, you might run into a situation. Now the cartels are going to splinter, and what we saw with the Mayo Zambadas is no, they quickly went with Mayito Flaco, 100% was in. And when Mayito Flaco said, well, my father was captured because of the betrayal of Los Chapitos. So we're going to war with Los Chapitos. It took a little bit.
He's right.
Yeah, a couple months. But then they went, and I think what we're seeing, and this probably can kind of go into the conversation, is, there was a split. What I would say, and this kind of reinforces this idea of Mayo Zambada being untouchable or having some sort of state level of support. It became pretty clear that the Mexican federal government during the Sinaloa cartel civil war picked a side who they supported, and they support the Mayito Flacos, I guess, Los Chapitos. And I think that's the thing, because the problem with Mayo Zambada, and I think why the Mexican government is a little bit concerned, is that if somebody knows all the dirty laundry, it's Mayo Zambada.
Sure.
He knows everything. Like, he is way more valuable, I think, than even El Chapo would be in that aspect. And so the United States government wants to leverage that. And I think the Mexican federal government is concerned about that connection. And I think there's a reason why then they decided to go after Los Chapitos in this Sinaloa civil war. One, I guess, just to end violence overall, so might as well pick one winner, and that way the violence kind of ends. But also because I think there's also this belief that deep-seated connection with Mayo Zambada and the Mexican, specifically the federal government, right? And even some state and local, especially state and local governments, but at the federal level, he was very, very, I think, well-connected with the Mexican elite. And I think that's why the Mexican federal government decided to back Los Mayito Flacos in their war against Los Chapitos. And I think the Chapitos are in trouble because they're losing support. And what I'll end with this before you kind of ask your question is, after El Chapo was captured and Los Chapitos were formed, which are the sons of El Chapo, right? Those are all of them. So you have Jesus Alfredo, Ovidio Guzman, Ivan Archibaldo, and Joaquin Guzman. What happens is now basically two of them are in prison, and you have Jesus Alfredo and Ivan Archibaldo left. I think the problem is Ivan Archibaldo, he's pretty, I consider him more of this hothead, the young guy.
Yeah,
right? Almost like Mayito Flaco now, right? Like, we have our father's image we have to imitate, so I need to show strength and power. Right? Go ahead.
Real quick, for all our fans of TV, Gamora, we would relate him to being like Jenny Savastano, who takes over for his father, which is very interesting. The Italian culture, Mexican culture, very similar, with the son taking over, heir apparent. And I think you would agree that Chapo views Ivan as that guy, right?
Yeah.
He's my heir apparent if I have one.
And so that's what happened, right? So you saw Mayo Zambada being captured. His son took over.
Yeah.
And what did Mayito Flaco do? Not only did he go at war against Los Chapitos, but if anything, he expanded his conflict with CJ&G in Zacatecas and Chiapas and Nayarit, right? He expanded, right? So we saw that in the Mayito Flaco side of the house. Ivan Archibaldo, but before even Mayo Zambada, like, Ivan Archibaldo was this guy that I think he really wanted to prove himself, right? Mm-hmm. And even within the brothers, I think it was undisputable fact within everyone that Ivan Archibaldo was the number one.
Sure.
Right? And then Ovidio Guzman was clearly number two. Ovidio Guzman had, his own faction within Los Chapitos called Los Ratones, very influential armed group, right? But the problem with Ivan Archibaldo, I think, is that he is also paranoid, very paranoid. I think he, from a lot of the conversations I had and kind of the reporting and talking to sources, I do believe he has this sense of paranoia. And what that kind of caused is him to lose kind of that support, specifically a lot of these factions and kind of these faction leaders to kind of break away from the Chapitos. It wasn't all sudden at once. It was a very long process to where we're the point where we are right now, which the conversation we're actually having is, it looks like those Chapitos are done. And the only thing left is from Ivan Archibaldo, which is the second one on the, from the screen on the left. It looks like Ivan Archibaldo is basically done. And if he falls, it's very hard to see the Chapitos continuing. It's just not feasible or likely.
The question that I continue to wonder about, and you mentioned Ovidio, you mentioned Joaquin. I also think it's important to understand that Chapo had multiple wives, right?
Correct.
We had 2 sons with one wife. He had 2 sons with another, Griselda Lopez, which are, I believe, Ovidio and Joaquin. I could be wrong.
I would have to look it up because there's so many of them that the family dynamic was just crazy. I agree.
Right. And then there's Emma Cornell, who had 2 daughters, young, right? You know, she's the beauty queen who did time recently. But you have like you have 2 sons who are in the streets, right, that are falling as far as their empire. You have 2 who are in custody that are probably going to cooperate. Then you have the father. My question to you is, a year from now, is the same end for all 4 of them the same? Like, do you ever think that they just say, you know what, we're beaten. I'm a dead man if I stay here. I'm just waiting to die. Let me try to get some of my life back. My brothers are doing it anyway. We can all come together. Do you ever think that will happen?
So, you know, here's the thing.
Or will he be found, you know, dead or disappeared?
I wouldn't be surprised if the Mexican federal government would love nothing more than Ruggiano Jr to be dead. But having said that, here's the thing. These guys don't want to end up in U.S. prison.
No.
They don't. They don't, because they know that's it.
Well, I guess my question is, do you foresee them, because as you know, it's the end of the road once you get extradited. All 4, you know, 2 have already essentially done it. Or the other 2 just say, you know what?
Yeah, I think it's going to happen, but not at their own decision. It's going to be the Mexican government that goes after them and captures them. I mean, that's really what's going to happen. And Ivan Archibaldo is not going to show up in the U.S. border and say, I surrender, I'm turning myself in, right? No, he's going to ride this out as long as possible. He still has those Chapitos are very loyal to him. It's like, I don't want people to underestimate that when I'm talking about the leadership, understanding that they're kind of in trouble, that Ivan Archibaldo is going to just renounce or give up. And if anything, I think those Chapitos are in denial, right? I think they're giving this image of strength and superiority, and this idea that they still have a lot of power and even influence maybe with the Sinaloa state government, that I don't think they're seeing how that's slowly being chipped away. And it's just waiting. And so that's the thing, right? If Ivan Archibaldo falls, I mean, do we really think Jesus Alfredo is going to pick up the mantle of those Chapitos? No. I mean, for our listeners who don't know, I mean, Jesus Alfredo is just like, he's like the little brother that nobody cares about, that he just kind of tags along and rides along. Yeah, I mean, he's not this charismatic. He doesn't even have that I'm aware of. He doesn't have an armed group like Ovidio Guzman did.
He just happens to be just that name. That name just happens to be his last name, and he takes the spoils.
And so that's the difference. Like if we were talking about, let's say, Jesus Alfredo, Joaquin Guzman, and then Ivan Archibaldo failed, I can make the argument, okay, Los Chapitos can continue with Ovidio Guzman. But once Ovidio Guzman fails, like, bro, Ivan, you got nobody.
Interesting, because I've heard at one point Chapo essentially said that he viewed Ovidio as not the weakest per se, but he didn't see him in that life.
Right, but maybe he, you know, but who cares? He had an armed group.
People, right?
Yeah, he kind of, and he was the one who did two Culiacanazos.
Yeah, right.
That was between him and his brothers who were like, no, you're not getting, and that's the thing, right? And what happened? So those 2 Culiacanazos, how they responded with Ovidio Guzman, and what did they do with Joaquin Guzman? They said, hey, turn yourself in, but turn in Mayo Zambada, but hey, good luck in American prison.
They didn't care, right?
Right? Yeah. Hey, Joaquin Guzman was viewed as the sacrificial lamb.
Right.
Go. Bye-bye. And so I think that's the issue. And again, I do, like, the Chapitos still are a powerful organization within Sinaloa. They still have a lot of groups. They still have a lot of, and it's kind of interesting when you're analyzing it. Like, there's even a conversation like who can maybe kind of take over if if the brothers fall. There are some faction leaders to look around. But I think, you know, if you kind of track, and you know, this really happened during the Biden administration, right? The previous administration, where you saw the degradation of Los Chapitos was during the Biden administration. There was a very concerted effort to go key leader at a time. I mean, one of the key ones that's not listed here, I don't know if you ever picture him, is El Nini, right? I mean, he was the head of security for Los Chapitos, and he was captured by Mexican authorities. There are conversations that if Ivan Archibaldo actually turned him into the Mexican authorities, because again, Ivan Archibaldo is paranoid, right? So if you're a faction leader like Los Yucos, that even have family ties with Los Chapitos, I was actually in an episode yesterday where I was talking about this. Like, yeah, los Yucos have family ties with los Chapitos, but you know, people are like, and I have this debate with a lot of kind of cartel observers, like, yeah, but family. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what's more powerful than family? Power and money. So if they see the Chapitos are done and the Maito Flacos are going up, yeah, of course they're going to switch sides. That happens all the time. Like, family blood means nothing. I mean, I can even make an argument that El Guano, the brother of El Chapo, might be like, dude, Ivan, you're done, man. I'm sorry, you're on your own. I'm not doing anything else for you.
And I saw you posted a video recently of him, you know, shooting off, you know, weapons in Badiraguato, which is,
I mean, that's his heartland. Badiraguato is his heartland of los Guanos. Sure. But even still, like, even the gente del Guano, like, yeah, that when the Culiacanazo can happen, there was some claims that los Guanos were going to kind of come in and support los Chapitos, but not to, you know, I haven't really seen that much. I mean, I kind of track a lot of these Guano guys on social media. And also, I haven't really seen that much.
You also understand, like, we're still talking about, this is two groups inside the same cartel that are fighting. We're not even talking about the fact that they're at war with, you know, CJNG, which we'll get to in a second. It's so interesting to understand, you know, and we also didn't even mention that I think possibly one of the reasons that maybe they did this with El Mayo is, well, if we look back to their own father, El Chapo Guzman, one of El Mayo's sons cooperated against El Chapo. I mean, it's just, and I think a lot of people that watch the mob content we do is, you know, in American Mafia lore, still, Omerta is very powerful, right? I will never get an active mobster to ever speak to me. They're that, you know, with that. In this world, you do what you have to do to, you know, there's no, like, that whole, like, rat thing is really just not important.
Yeah, I know, though. So actually, that's actually some of the things, like, and the difference where I think, you know, I'm not intimately familiar with the American mob and kind of the backstory of their history, but one of the things I would say is, for example, I don't see the American mob going to American press and give them scoops. Okay, that happens. Exactly. The cartels do that all the time.
Right, which is like, I think when we talk about, like, global crime, that's why I always get a kick out of this. Like, not that Omerta isn't something that these people should follow. Like, I get it, whatever, but nobody cares in the end. You do what you have to do to survive and flourish, and that's what you have to do. I want to ask you about Ovidio because we recently got some interesting news. He's accepted a plea, right? Now, with an individual at his height, you don't just get a plea and they give you a 10-year sentence and you go away. No, they're going to get info out of you. We also have heard, and Pio Denote and Luis Chaparro put this out, that this is Ovidio's family. This is El Chapo's family. These are people that are direct descendants of El Chapo. They're at an international bridge, and they are being ferried into the United States, which I find interesting because this is the same government that says we don't accept illegal immigrants, but now it benefits them, so we'll accept them. And guess who will pay for that? Taxpayers. What does this all mean? What do you think?
So first, kudos where kudos is given. I actually DM'd Luis when he broke, because I was like, dude, that's a huge scoop.
Yes, it is.
He's like, bravo, man, that's a huge scoop.
He's really growing. Yeah,
he's great. I highly recommend him. And I actually kind of made a small video about that. Again, don't hate me. I'm not a professional podcaster, guys. Like,
you'll get there.
Like, hopefully, I might. But until then, you know, I just want to say, hey, let's have some fun. But you know, one of the things I was speculating in one of the videos I made was, okay, this is kind of two conversations, right? And I kind of tweeted about this earlier, which was, did Ovidio Guzman, as part of it clearly, you know, part of the plea deal, you don't accept over 15 members of Ovidio Guzman's family, to include his mother, I believe, into the U.S. without part of an agreement, right? And who would Ovidio give information on? Because El Chapo's already been convicted, done, his trial is over. Well, is it Mayo Zambada, right? And so did Ovidio Guzman do this? There's kind of two trains of thoughts, and there's probably truth in both. One, he's concerned about his family's safety because he's now a witness for the U.S. prosecutors against Mayo Zambada, so they don't want them to target the family, number one. Or number two, he sees the writing is on the wall and los Chapitos are done, right? So get my family out, because if los Chapitos fall, everybody who's been in the Chapo is probably dead. But what that indicates, regardless of how you think about it, is that Ovidio does not believe Iván Archibaldo can protect his family. I mean, that's the story.
Sure.
That Ovidio Guzman does not think that Iván Archibaldo, the leader of los Chapitos, can protect his own family. So again, it kind of goes back to this issue, and it's to your point, though, the kind of the difference between the American mob and the cartels. The cartels talk to anybody. I have sources in the Mexican cartels, so they talk to me, they tell me stuff. Like, and I think that's the thing. It could be because people always ask me, why do cartel members have social media? And I think there's this mentality that they're like the American mob, or like the Italian mafia. And it's like they're not.
Well, that's what I want to ask you. I want you to talk about that, because whenever I put stuff out. And I remember, do you remember when those 4 Americans were kidnapped at Matamoros?
2 of them two were killed. Yeah.
I got a Border Patrol guy that sent me a photo that was exclusive, and I put it out. And I remember some of the things that I put out, and people always say, aren't you scared to talk about this stuff? And I say, the myth that a cartel member, look, if you disrespect a cartel group, yeah, maybe in Culiacan, they'll get to you. But tell people, they want people to know about this stuff. They call journalists and tell them, hey, put this out, put that out. Like, can you? So
I actually, it's so funny. I literally had this conversation yesterday on another episode. I think there's a fundamental difference, right, when we're talking about the cartels. If you're first of all, Mexico is one of the most dangerous places for journalists, like full stop, right? And so within Mexico, absolutely, like there is a significant danger. But it's specifically tied to what I would say is if you're actually going to do specifically investigative reporting on, let's say, Mexican corruption or business dealings or cartel activities that can affect their bottom lines, then they will kill you. I know for a fact that there's a major Mexican news organizations on the payroll of cartels. I'm not going to name them. Wow. I know for a fact that they get paid. A cartel pays a specific news organization to ensure that they publish either friendly information or information they want, or they bury stories. Like
that's power. That's power.
And we even know where Mexican news organizations have reached out to the cartels because they were killing their journalists to just tell us what you don't want us to publish. Tell us what to publish.
Wow.
Keep us safe. Because there's a fundamental difference, right? There's a difference, which is, am I doing deep-seated investigation to find out Mexican corruption? And the question then becomes, is it really the cartel or is it the government or both? Right? That's a different aspect, right? Because I think when we're talking about corruption in Mexico, there's this idea that's generally believed that the corruption is the cartel corrupting the political official. I said this in Prosecutor, right? It's like this bottom up, which happens. Do not get me wrong. It's a bottom up approach where cartels corrupt the political officials and those politicians serve at the behest of the cartel. But it also happens the other way around, where the power of the corruption is the government official who then tells the cartel, you're going to do this. And if you don't, I'm sending the military after you. We saw that. General Cienfuegos, the highest ranking Mexican army general, right, was detained in the United States. He had to, long story short, the Trump administration caved, released him back to the Mexican authorities in his first Trump administration. But General Cienfuegos, like he controlled the cartel, like the specific one of the BLO, right? And when he was done with them, he just sent the Mexican special forces and they executed him on the spot. Right? There was this great reporting from the New York Times that lays it out. I mean, look up New York Times General Cienfuegos, right? They lay it out. And when you read that, it clears. It's like, it's not the cartel member who was the guy who controlled the Mexican government. It was the government who controlled him.
Sure.
And that's the thing. And so if you're a Mexican journalist reporting on that, yeah, they'll go after you and they'll kill you. But from an American perspective, there's a general rule of thumb. It's like, dude, don't mess up the area where we sell our profits, right? Like, and so when these Americans were, as you rightfully pointed out, these 2 Americans were killed and 2 were captured. They thought they were Haitian smugglers.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And there was Grupo Escorpión, which is a faction of the Gulf Cartel, the Scorpion Group out of Matamoros, Tamaulipas, which borders Brownsville. When Grupo Escorpión found out, like, oh shit, these are Americans, what they did is they told the Mexican authorities, go here. The other 2 Americans are here.
And there's our people that did it. Right?
And then, and in another instance, they lined them all up in a truck with their hands tied up, and then they put a sign basically saying, "Hey, America, our bad. We didn't know. Here's the guys responsible for doing this. Please don't go after us." Right?
But in a way, it almost is completely embarrassing that they have that much power to just do that, broker their deals with America, and like Mexico did nothing about it. They didn't. Now, what's interesting too is that guy that allegedly ruled that group, La Quena, who he was a part of that historic extradition a couple of months ago. Do you think it's insane that?
Well, he's not in U.S. custody.
I thought I saw he had been extradited.
No, his extradition got approved.
So he
gets captured. Here's the corruption piece. He was captured, and then a Mexican judge let him loose.
Ah, I must have missed it.
Apparently, he has an ankle bracelet on. Tell me.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll follow.
So El Contador, yeah, that's the thing. It's like, and so that's the kind of the deal where it basically the Mexican government said blanket extraditions for people detained, and then there's kind of this clause that if they get detained, immediate extradition into the United States. He's one of them because he's the leader of the Scorpion Group. But just another quick example of how they don't want to mess with Americans. For example, the CDN cartel, the Northeast cartel. When El Ricky, who was like the number 2, I considered him number 3. Other people said number 2. I think he was in charge of Los Chukis, a faction of the CDN cartel. When the Mexican government detained him, violence in Nuevo Laredo exploded, blah, blah, blah. The next day, CDN released a video statement basically saying, and in part of that video, they said, our war is not with DEA in Laredo, Texas. We're not here to fight DEA. We don't want to get involved with the DEA. Our fight is with corrupt government. They even said our fight is not with the Mexican government. Our fight is with some people and corrupt officials and rivals, blah, 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 blah. But that's part of this underlying messaging of Mexican cartels, which is they don't necessarily, in large part, want to replace the Mexican government. And they don't, they understand that it's bad for business if you mess with America. And so that's why, it's a very hard conversation to say, well, if the U.S. does something, are the Mexican cartel is going to retaliate? And I said, it's within the realm of possibility, absolutely. But what I say to people is like, I think it's a lot higher than we think. And the reason why I say that is you're telling me that the United States kidnapped Mayo Zambada unilaterally. The Mexican government had no idea about this operation. They kidnapped him, flew him to El Paso, detained him. His son comes in charge, and he does nothing against the United States. Like, if that doesn't cause a reaction from a Mexican cartel, then I was like,
well, Will,
okay, a drone strike against a cartel leader, is that, okay, but what's for a cartel point of view, if you're in an American prison, you're already dead. It doesn't matter. You're done. Like,
right. I want to ask you about the kind of the thought that Trump will go after these people. And I will say too, there's no one that hopes 77-year-old El Mayo dies quick than the Mexican government. I think they're hoping he'll just pass away of natural causes, and that'll be that. But in terms of a video, it's probably, pretty much a foregone conclusion that both he and his brother are going to cooperate. And there is a very strong likelihood. And I've talked about this before with just the overall way the American government does business with cooperators. I think it's really one of the black eyes that this country has on doing business with these types of people. But think about this, Stefano. Someday, this is an individual who will literally live just in America somewhere. Mm-hmm. No one will be notified. No one will know that some new subdivision that's built, this family's moving in. No one will know who he is. Don't you think that's pretty insane? That, like, I talked to someone recently that knows Ray Zambada, the brother of El Mayo. He is also living very openly in America. There's
a lot of them live in America.
It's pretty unbelievable, isn't it? Like,
yeah, but let's look at like how many people within Russians elite live in America. How many within China's elite live in America?
It's just insane. Like how, like, there's no warning. Like, hey, this is Ovidio Guzman, like the Flores twins. They just live in America somewhere,
Yeah, that's just how it is. That's I don't think that people might find it shocking, but it's always been like that.
Sure,
right? We've accepted probably way worse people into the U.S. for whatever plea deal we need or any negotiation we want, right?
That's true, and that's one of the reasons that as I get older, I never just in real life when I'm out and I don't disrespect anyone because you never know who your neighbor next door is. You never know who that guy is at the store that you're beeping.
You never know. Exactly.
It's a good idea, but okay, so yeah, obviously the Sinaloa cartel is beefing with themselves. The Chapitos are falling. This will arguably down the road make Maito Flaco one of the most powerful people in Mexico, probably outside of El Mencho. We also have to remember, and you've reported on this pretty openly, that not only are they fighting the Sinaloa cartel, but they're trying to make inroads in Chiapas, which is a big state for kind of the taking. Because again, as you know, like that's where a lot of the migrant caravans are going into, and there's a lot of rich territory there. We have to remember, though, they are still in an active war with their enemy, Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generacion.
So I think, yeah. So I think CG&G, if there's one if we're going to say a blanket term, cartel, mafia, gang, organized crime, whatever criminal term you want to say, which CG&G is the largest with most international reach by far. It dwarfs any other group. I don't care what mafia, but no, we know we've seen CG&G activity with India, that the Indian government has detained people that are directly associated with CG&G, and we've seen them in Kenya being detained. I mean,
wow,
right? Like these guys have the reach. Like Sinaloa is probably a second one. CG&G, number one. They're the ones with the most amount of reach. I mean, you can even tie a lot of the violence, let's say in Ecuador with the gang violence, with kind of this exportation of cartel violence from Mexico into Ecuador between the Sinaloa cartel and CG&G and kind of the gangs in Ecuador. The irony is in Colombia, there were times where they were fighting, and there was times where both CG&G and Sinaloa in Colombia said, hey, let's just get a ceasefire here. We'll fight in Mexico, but this is where we get our product. So like, peace. Okay, cool. But in Ecuador, and so it's this very interesting dynamic around the world. But yeah, CG&G is a very powerful international, transnational criminal organization, reach everywhere. I mean, every continent, except Antarctica, obviously. But and what I'm seeing is CG&G is the kind of the group that's probably going to benefit the most eventually from kind of the split in the Sinaloa cartel. But I would say Maito Fleco is pressuring CG&G really hard, specifically in Zacatecas, right? Like in Zacatecas, CG&G is not doing too hot. They're not. And so this is kind of, again, this very interesting development. But what I would say with CG&G, I think the thing I'm looking at is I don't believe the succession. Let's say El Mancho gets captured or killed. And it's funny, like you always hear these rumors at least once a quarter that El Mancho died. It's like, yeah, he's not dead. He's still, but you always hear it every single time that he's dead. But what the question I have is if he does die, like who's going to succeed in Metro? And this, unlike the Sinaloa cartel, which was pretty clear was going to be the children, both of Mayo Zambada and El Chapo, CG&G, it's not that clear, because one thing is for certain, like the brothers of El Metro get captured all the time by Mexicans.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Mexican authorities capture the brothers, and CG&G does nothing to respond to it or do anything or to even to protect them. They just get captured and detained, and they rot in Mexican prison or even in American prison. And so, that's something where, that's the key aspect. I'm not seeing a strong family. There's a lot of lieutenants, but if he falls, do we then see the breaking of CG&G, or do they quickly coalesce around somebody more key and more important?
When you look at his son, El Manchito, he recently got life. We see a stark major difference between one family and the other. He was presented with a plea deal. They wanted him to give up his own mother. He declined and took his sentence. Do you think if they'd have come to him and said, hey, give us somebody else, do you think he would have did it? Do you think it was just the fact that it was his mother?
One of the things that I would say is the problem with El Mencho and CG&G specifically that I would kind of have, the problem we're running into is that he's not much is known about him. I mean, put the picture back up. Put the picture back up if you may.
That's the only picture.
That's it. Literally. And I guarantee you, he doesn't look like that now, but that's it.
Sure.
Right. And so that's kind of the problem. So the dynamic I said earlier about his family, right? And so, when you're tracking the family in the Sinaloa cartel, and even like the main financial backers of Los Chapitos and Mayzabal, there's like a lot of names that get thrown around.
Everybody knows them. Yeah.
You kind of like could do a network and all that. The problem with CG&G, like you have that network within the faction leaders and the lieutenants, but when you're actually talking about the inner circle of El Mencho, it's pretty hard, even the family members, right? There's a lot of names that get thrown out to see who, like I said, El Mencho will replace. I'm leaning a little bit. It's kind of hard. There's a couple. I think El Jardinero is somebody I'm keeping an eye on. He's a key leader of CG&G who operates mainly in Jalisco and Nayarit. That's why I think he's important, because he kind of operates in the power base of the Jalisco New Generation cartel, like the main territories. He has his presence there. That's why it's like, okay. But it goes back to that. Like if El Mancho falls, you can see a scenario. Do they quickly coalesce around somebody, or now do you see these various different figures start fighting each other for control? And the problem with the family dynamic of El Mencho is, I mean, you kind of have an idea of who's who in the zoo, but they don't really have that much power and influence. Like the brothers of El Mencho, yeah, they're involved in CG&G and they get detained and arrested, but they're not like Ovidio Guzman or Iván Archibaldo that have these power brokers with them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. I mean, Mayito Flaco quickly rose up. Mayito Flaco wasn't anticipating to be the leader, but he quickly rose up in the ranks and became it after his father was detained. You look at El Mencho and it's like, Mayito Flaco was known, but El Mencho is like, who? And when you're talking about CG&G, there's more of these internal leaders, como el Jardinero, there's like, Doble R even in Guanajuato. And so that's the problem. I think the son got detained because he's the son. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I think people thought he was dead. Like he faked
Menchito?
Yeah. Or like he faked his death and then he was detained because he wanted to see his girlfriend or something in the United States.
Right.
Okay. Does that scream as like the leader?
I think he also, like he has another son that I believe lives in like San Diego or something.
I mean, that happens.
That's the like SeaWorld.
Yeah. But Mayito Gordo was taking a picture in San Diego.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And so, but in Menchito's side of the house,
right?
It's like, okay, is that El Menchito? Is that the guy that's really going to be this, even before he was captured in the, like, really, that's the guy?
I think again, but this government just says, well, he is his son, so he's probably involved. And
he is. It's a family business. They can't. Come on.
But what I'm saying is, I'm not saying he's not.
Yeah.
But all they really do, the government, is just present you with a bunch of informants that say they knew him, and they're not going to really go down there and do investigations. They just take the word of these people. What does this government, what would a jury know about what's going on there? That's, I think, where I'm going here. Like a person like this, regardless of whether he's a bad guy or not, he obviously is, and he deserves to go to prison, but he has no shot at a trial. None. Going to trial is a complete waste of time.
Well, talk to that to any federal prosecutor case that has a conviction rate of over 90%.
But they offer, but what I'm saying is, like, a plea is one thing. Like, he has no shot at anything. He's getting life.
And I would agree with you. It's because of his father.
Yeah.
But don't discount the possibility of the U.S. government leveraging that for something down the road.
That's a good point. I mean, also, I'll point out too, and this has been discussed to me personally, that he's like he's on Sam's measures, which is special administration. There are very few people in America in the prison system that are in that. They'll say, well, he hasn't been active in 10 years. He has no standing anymore whatsoever. Why is he in these penitentiaries? And I think they look at it as he hasn't been involved for years. But is someone like this still someone that could, what is he going to do, like, in that organization? You think he's going to get on the phone and start making deals like it? I
mean, see, here's the thing, though, of kind of the convoluted nature of U.S. prosecutors, law enforcement cases, and this is kind of the difference with the Mexican cartels and the American Mafia. There's a lot that goes in the background that we will never know, and how it does that. I mean, again, perfect example. It's very hard to make an argument that Joaquin Guzman, the son of El Chapo, didn't turn in Mayo Zambada if it wasn't because Ovidio Guzman was captured and was in U.S. prison.
Right.
There has to be a link between Ovidio Guzman telling Joaquin Guzman, turn in Mayo.
Of course.
Right? And so that's the thought process that the U.S. government has with all these sons that get captured. Right? It's how can then we leverage this for further things? So let's throw the book at you. Can we then leverage that?
I guess that's true. You think about
Mencho. Yeah. And at the end of the day, there's this all the Constitution, right? Like, got it. Look, you went to trial through your peers, and they convicted you. Tough luck. And all these guys are in the family business. It's pretty known. And then, okay, now they throw that book at you, and then the government can use that as leverage for maybe a bigger fish. It could be eventual, it could be somebody else.
And this is why you're so good at this, because it kind of takes me into my next question. Before I get to that, though, it's a really interesting point, because there's a film about U.S. prisons called Shot Caller. It's a very good movie. And there's an Aryan Brotherhood member in kind of segregation. He talks to another member, and he says they build places like this to break people like us, right? And I think you make a good point about Menchita, right? He's still a young guy, right? He's in his early 30s, I believe. You know,
35, I think he is.
He's still a young
35,
guy.
yeah.
You go 5 years in an ADX, and all of a sudden you're saying, this is a lot. I'm gonna break in a place like this. If I have to live like this the rest of my life. And it's a good point about maybe down the road that could be beneficial. And it takes me to our friend El Chapo, right? Or old buddy. We forgot about El Chapo, right? He's wasting away in ADX. He's writing letters every couple of months, whining about the conditions, and he wants to see his family. We've heard about his sons doing things. There are rumblings, and maybe you've heard some of these, that is he actively trying to get out of ADX? Is he trying to provide some information? Just get some relief, at least. He's never going to get out of prison, but do you ever see that happening where maybe even he gives some info and gets out?
Yeah. Yes.
Do you think it's happening right now?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I have nothing like it. This is just pure opinion. Let me make this abundantly clear. It's not not per my sources or nothing. Yeah. But honestly, once these guys are in U.S. prisons, they break because they know they're done. There's nothing else. I mean, it might as well just die. It doesn't. So make the best out of it, and these guys will eventually talk with enough pressure. And it's not. And again, these guys were businessmen. It's not like, I mean, it's not like an ideologue that wants to commit an attack against the United States for whatever belief they might have, right? Or this code of honor within the American, the Italian mafia.
Do what you do. Yeah.
No, these guys break and they'll turn anybody in if you apply the right amount of pressure. And I think El Chapo's cooperating. He's pushing information. Now the question is it valuable to the U.S. government? And for cases and for further either investigative or intelligence work, it's up to the government to decide. But that's the thing about these guys is that in the end of the day, they put themselves in a business that was going to get the wrath of the U.S. government. And more importantly, I mean, El Chapo is responsible for the death of tens of thousands of Mexicans.
Sure.
Like, nobody's going to have sympathy for him for this. Like, and unless like the diehards and all that, and the people that live in these or remote communities or communities that depended on those Chapitos, the Sinaloa cartel under when he was leader, support to maintain the community. People don't necessarily care. And actually, one of the interesting aspects when we're talking about cartel violence, right, either CG&G, the Sinaloa cartel civil war, when you talk to Mexicans, is like, dude, we just want peace and stability. Pick a winner, let that person win. Like I've started hearing people say, let the Chapitos lose, so let the Maito Flacos in. We don't care. We're done with this. We're done with this work.
You mentioned remote populations. You mentioned these populations. What percentage of Mexicans do you think support cartels over the government? Percentage.
So it's hard to say because let me give you some data. The Mexican cartels as a whole, like all of them, right? The Gulf cartel, CDN, and again, the Sinaloa cartel civil war. There's another civil war. It's called the Gulf cartel civil war.
Sure.
Technically, they still have a ceasefire in place, but they split. And there was a very interesting sanction list related to that. But Mexican cartels are the 5th largest employer in Mexico.
Yeah, it's insane.
Right. And then the last estimate I saw a couple of years ago it was an article from the Washington Post. It was kind of like a U.S. intelligence estimate that was reported by the Washington Post, claimed that about 1/3 of Mexican territory is directly governed by Mexican cartels.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Right. And that's direct control. That's generally your more remote areas.
But a third?
That's a third of the territorial, right? Because the Mexican government doesn't agree. And then the question then becomes, okay, well, how much is it that Mexico has, cartel influence? Is probably almost 100 or 90% is very significant. But then it goes back to the original question is, where is it that the cartel has the power? Is it the Mexican corrupt government official has the power? Like if you look at Tamaulipas, and the violence that goes there, it's very hard to make an argument about the violence all there without looking directly at the Tamaulipas state government and the corruption they had there, like with El Vaca, the previous governor, right? I mean, that was a well-known corrupt official that leveraged these kind of cartels for his own interests and profits, right? And so again, now we're running into this game of this problem to your point about kind of the judiciary. I've said this a million times, and I'll say it again. The problem we're running into is the most effective anti-corruption body in Mexico is the Southern District of New York. So, right. And so now, in this aspect of territorial control and population support in Mexico, fifth largest employer, a third, kind of do the math. It's substantial, but it's also because of an economic necessity.
So we're talking like 70-80%?
And no, I wouldn't. No. And again, you got to look at this from like
I guess I'm talking about like the everyday like person that lives in Mexico. Have cartels been more beneficial to them or the government?
No. I mean, well, it depends who you ask, and this is the problem. Like when we're regularly start like Mexican cartels, right? It's kind of like, so. For example, like if you're a guy in Guanajuato, do you really like the Santa Rosa, the Lima cartel who just goes into bars and does mass shootings? No,
they're just extorting people and stuff, right?
Right, and so that's the problem. And again, and then there's kind of this argument that AMLO made: hugs, not bullets. Right? We need to give them economic opportunities. Right? And so, it's much more complex. Now, again, it goes back to this conversation, like the Mexican cartels. Yet to see in the years I've been covering is a Mexican cartel leader come out and say, we're going to overthrow the Mexican government. It's not what they're going to do. They're never going to do that. That's not how they operate. That's not how they do it. And so again, that's the kind of the problem. It's when you ask about support, it's the problem is when we go to this line of thinking, it kind of ties to like, let's say how many people in Gaza support Hamas. Right. Which is a governing, foreign terrorist organization with government control and military power inside of Gaza, and how much population support to that because of also ideological reasonings or economic or whatever, right? And the cartel piece, I mean, these are businesses, right? And so the support, you can kind of make an argument, the support they have is probably more because of the money, because of their employer, right? But and
I get what you're saying.
But it's not necessary, because that's the problem I have when they tie it to support. It kind of ties into this like Afghanistan and the Taliban, and I don't think that's a right way of analyzing or looking at it.
I got what you're saying. So one other question on that, and a lot of people wonder about this: how, like percentage-wise, of the Mexican government, from your mayors to the top levels, how corrupted percentage-wise is Mexican government?
Man, you're really, I mean, percentage is kind of hard to say. I mean,
like a large amount, or
absolutely, yeah. Okay. I mean, let me just say this: like, you don't get to the highest level of Mexican power without being a corrupt.
Like even to the point of like Scheinbaum?
I mean, all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, Enrique Peña Nieto was corrupt. AMLO was well known to be connected to
But I guess if you look at like America, I mean, they're not corrupt to the level that we're talking here, but they all are corrupt.
I mean, but it's not. Yeah, but these are like, again, it's
the direct criminal organization,
right? The direct tie. I mean, you can make it. Yeah, but I mean, in the United States, trust me, you don't want Mexican judiciary. Be thankful you have American. Right? No, seriously. And like, I mean, look at the cases against, Bob Menendez, the senator of New Jersey, right? I mean, and George Santos, Congressman. I mean, look, there's cases, they go there, we could be frustrated, but trust me, it's nowhere even remotely the same comparison. It's almost insulting to Americans. Yeah. Like, as an American, I'm like, don't ever compare us to kind of the levels of corruption in Mexico, because that's the difference.
You're talking about these are corrupt to the level of like with criminal organizations, they're allowing really bad things to happen, and
or they get paid to allow bad things to happen, right? Because they have the power, because especially at the higher levels of the Mexican government goes back, like the General Cienfuegos case. I mean, the closest comparison I would make with that, imagine the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff basically running, having a drug cartel, allowing a drug cartel to run operations as long as they pay him. And one day he wakes up, that split happens because of the BLO and the Sinaloa cartel and all these kind of crisis and tensions. And the general says, like, man, these guys are causing too much problem for me. I'm going to go with these guys. Let's just kill them. So send SEAL Team 6 and kill them.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at even like Genaro Garcia Luna. You look at like some of
exactly. He's a national security advisor, basic equivalent-esque. Yeah. And he's in prison.
Yeah, I don't want you to, if you don't want to answer this, I understand. But like a lot of people have said Omar Garcia Harfuch is also corrupt, right? Like that guy El Cholo had mentioned that he had been meeting with him, and like he's pretty high up at this point, isn't he? Like it.
Oh yeah. I let me just say I don't disagree with any of those assertions. I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean that's the thing though. I mean, it's kind of this aspect of how. It's like when Congressman Dan Crenshaw said, I remember he was in Mexico City and he made this video, like, we have political leaders that are very interested in clamping down in cartels. I'm like, okay. Maybe. I don't know how much is true or lip service, but let's make the argument that it's true, that they're really serious. Okay, yeah. Well, can they stop being so corrupt?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
like, dude, and then that's the frustration aspect, right? And it's kind of, I don't want to sound like this tear down the Mexican government, bring it down, revolution. That's not what I'm saying, but it's like, can the reason why corruption is so rampant in Mexico is because they don't have effective anti-corruption measures, and nobody's ever going to produce. We don't have the political will of the United States to institute those types of policies inside of Mexico.
Right.
And the problem also becomes is that the Mexican government doesn't have the capability to do it themselves, either for their own internal reasons, why they still want to get corrupt and make money. But even if they have the capacity and the will to, I mean, even if they have the will to do it, they don't have the capacity to do it. They don't even have maintained stability in 100% of the Mexican territory, right? Can you really have anti-corruption without security? And it's again, this convoluted, complex issue. And sometimes it's like this wheel in my head that goes around. It's like the chicken or the egg, right? It's nonstop. Corruption, security. But yeah, to answer your question without copying out, yeah, I do believe Omar is
well,
a government official.
Before we get into some like fun, like kind of interesting questions at the end, I do want to talk about the Trump administration and their, we've seen this, this whole like plan to take down cartels. And I always found the bottom one funny. It's ask Congress to ensure drug smugglers and traffickers receive the death penalty, but yet we'll do deals with people like this. It's kind of hypocrisy. But, the thought is, oh, well, we're going to go in and we're going to just address all these guys. We're going to get rid of them. And it's kind of a long-winded question, but how do you address, first of all, attacking an ally? Like you're just going to go in and just start attack. Like that's kind of an insane thought. And like, let's say, for instance, like, let's say they did do this and it worked, right? All the cartels were eliminated. I mean, does Donald Trump actually think that, first of all, won't others just come in and assume it? Because again, this is a multi-billion-dollar group. And number two, when are we going to address the demand issue that we have in America that funnels and fuels this?
So let me answer with this. I mean, I would agree with you that it's kind of like there's overlap, but they're two separate issues that overlap, right? The drug consumption. Yes, we have to address it. I'm not absolutely
sure.
This idea that, for example, I kind of previewed this in an earlier comment. The U.S. put sanctions against Primito, who was the leader of those Metros, a golf cartel faction. Funny enough, the Treasury Department said he's not Metros. He's not golf cartel. I'm sorry. He doesn't belong to the golf cartel. He directly now is CG&G. He's not a faction of the golf cartel. He's CG&G. Because we knew there was an alliance between the Metros of the golf cartel and CG&G. What's very interesting with the sanction list, if you read it, they're saying he's not golf cartel. No, he is CJ&G full stop. Why was he sanctioned? Fuel theft. That was then smuggled into the United States.
Right.
Obviously drugs as well, but that's the key component of the sanction list was fuel theft, and specifically the businesses that he leveraged and operate to push fuel into the U.S. And I say that because, yeah, you can deal with drugs and try to, I'm all for it. Like treat it as a mental health or whatever you want to do. Hell, you can make the argument, legalize drugs. Fine. If you think that's going to stop Mexican cartels, you don't know how Mexican cartels operate. They're in fuel. They're in agriculture. Michoacan sees intense level of violence between the United Cartel and CG&G, two foreign terrorist organizations designated by the Trump administration, because of avocado and lime.
Sure.
And USDA inspector in 2022 was attacked. All he was trying to do was do a food inspection on avocados. So the U.S. then said, we're halting all avocado shipments from Mexico into the United States until we can get the situation sorted out. And it looked like it was the United Cartel. And the United Cartel was like, oh, shit. Okay, don't target USDA inspectors. Let them do their job. We want to push our product through. It was avocados.
Yeah.
Guys, it's avocados.
It's every facet of the community.
Anything they can make money, they're going to make money. It's like the marijuana, right? When we legalized, many states legalized marijuana. Great. What happened? Yes, they stopped coming from Mexico into the United States, but what did we see is illegal marijuana farming exploded in the United States, right? And actually, the Chinese triads were the ones that gained the most of that, right? And I'm not making an argument to not legalize marijuana. Like, smoke pot, go for it. It doesn't affect me. Go for it. Great. But the thing is it's not this idea to solve the problem, right? It's not this silver bullet, this magic bullet that's going to kill off Mexican cartels. They're in legitimate businesses.
That's what I don't like. That's what I've always tried to understand and try to convey to people, that these are really, as you said really eloquently earlier, these are businessmen and businesses at the end of the day. And
you need to look at, I'm so glad I had this. Yesterday, I said that I was having a conversation with somebody who's a researcher, And I told them, look, don't view cartels just as criminal organization. View them as corporations. That's what they are. They're networks. They're networks that do legal and illegal businesses that don't have the constraint of law, and they operate as a corporation. And if they see profits drop because of one product, they'll find something else, either illegal drugs, human smuggling, anything legal, used cars. It doesn't matter. And so that's the thing. I can even make an argument that by legalizing drugs, let's say we manage to cut off all money that the cartels receive from drug smuggling into the United States. I can make an argument that what's that going to force is the cartels to become even more violent, because now they're going to be focusing on much more so than they are now, which is territorial control. And they'll just do extortion or whatever or taxes. They don't care. Mm-hmm. These are corporations. That's how you need it. And if they see profits drop somewhere, they'll find somewhere else to gain it.
They're a supply and demand business as well at the end of the day. And we've seen this in Italy. We've seen this in all sorts of places. This is how the mafia is so powerful in Italy. They'll address, we know there's a huge demand for designer bags, so we'll just get fake ones and sell them that look like real. Like they just address needs and they fill it. That's why I've always found like some of the rhetoric by Donald Trump and that administration, really government in general, to be so obtuse, because like you're addressing one thing. And as I said, remember, someone will just come in and fill the need, right? Someone will find a way to find this marketplace, this American marketplace, right? It's a big thing, but we don't even address that. Like Australia is a huge part in the drug trade now, Canada, and that takes me to kind of some interesting, just funner questions in a way. This is really a fun question, but it takes me to the topic of this guy, right? This guy, Ryan Wedding, right? He has become this mythical figure, right? He was this skier from Canada.
Oh my God. This is such a crazy story.
What is his, I mean, because we've heard that they call him El Jefe, which is like, insane. But what is his standing, not inside the Sinaloa cartel, but there has been rumor that they're, keeping him safe, maybe not in Mexico, but somewhere else. What is his true standing? Is it actually as
I think Weddings is a perfect example of this is how I view him. I think he is very much well connected, but I've heard those conversations as well that specifically the Sinaloa cartel that he's kind of I view him as kind of like this. He runs his drug trafficking organization kind of independently, just connected with a larger group and does businesses and all that. And I think that's another aspect. It's like the human smuggling, right? From Mexico to the United States, and Wedding fits this. It's like there's local and family networks that are the main drivers of human smuggling into the United States. They just pay a fee to the cartel to be able to do it, or for other services. And to me, that's how I view Wedding. Like he built a very powerful drug trafficking organization in Mexico to push product into North America, leveraging connections with larger cartels, possibly the Sinaloa cartel, right? But he's a perfect example, right? I mean, Weddings is a key thing. And, the U.S. has been after him. And ironically, he was already detained once. I think 2015, he was detained. For those who don't know, Weddings used to be a Canadian Winter Olympian.
Skier, or something, snowboarder or something.
Yeah, I think it was skier. Winter Olympics, and then from that, I think he placed like 20 something. He did terrible, and then from there, he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go to drug dealing." Got detained, released, did it again, and built a larger infrastructure in Mexico, but within that construct of like this independent-esque drug trafficking organization that's just very well connected with other larger cartels and does businesses that way.
We did see that his number 2, Andrew Clark, was extradited. He was arrested. And it's funny when they found this like hitman that Clark and Wedding had, this black guy from, I think, Toronto. And it was so like rudimentary how he was doing the hits. Like they were on some app and they were just like, hey, go do this, go do that, go to Dubai and do this, do that. Do you think they're actually protecting him?
Who is protecting him?
Sinaloa?
That's my understanding. I think in a way, yeah. That's kind of, I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's also, I think he's just also very good. I think he's just been at this at a long time that he probably,
elusive, right?
Yeah. Weddings just has good trade craft and he understands and he's like very prepared and understanding. But yeah, I would agree with that. I do believe in some aspects he has some level of protection. specifically within the Sinaloa cartel. But I just also think that he's very adept and knows what he's doing because he's been doing this for such a long time. He already served prison once, so I think he's there. And by the way, as you mentioned with the hitman, he's a very violent human being. Like
dug in, right?
Like 24 people directly killed, I think, because of him or something. Like, and he has a big
yeah, sure.
And then, but that's an interesting. That's kind of also the conversations, weddings. Not, I mean, he set up his own kind of thing, but it's kind of this overall Canadian mafia, very well connected into Mexico.
We don't talk enough, and I've tried to explain to people how powerful, like, the Montreal Mafia is, the Vito Rizzuto group, like that. You know, his son's now running it, the Hells Angels, like how connected they are to Mexico and, you know, into the western parts of Canada. These are kind of fun questions. But I want to ask, Sicario, you see these shows like Narcos and stuff like that. How true are they?
I mean, there's dramatization. I mean, okay, so Sicario, like, you know, U.S. unilateral military operations. I you know, I've kind of talked to some guys that used to, you know, maybe in the past, I think the U.S. did do some things, but like, you know, how much and all that. Like, you know, from what I'm tracking, a lot of it now, like from the CNN reporting, is like the drone overflights, the U-2s, especially since the Trump administration. I was interviewed for the Rolling Stone for this. Kevin Maurer, great reporter for Rolling Stones. You know, he been already in 2 pieces with him and kind of talking about this. You know, what I would say, though, I mean, it's a dramatization, but one of the aspects I think that kind of Sicario, not necessarily, I would say, from the U.S. perspective, but from a Mexican perspective, I do think there's kind of this belief within Mexico, which was we were peaceful when there was just one group. And if you look at Sicario 2, what the U.S. was saying is, hey, we need them to fight for them to weaken. And I think that's the difference sometimes between the U.S. and Mexico when we're analyzing this problem. I don't blame the Mexican government, by the way. Like, they could say, look, the peace and stability of our citizens is number one. Now, that might mean I need to target this cartel because they're out of control, like those Zetas. Go after them, get them out. The Tijuana cartel, the Arellano Felix organization, get it. Others is like, dude, we got to pick one. We got to make one win because we're done with this violence, right? And if one controls, like, okay, do we really want to go after that? Because like, that's a decision that the Mexicans at the local, state, and federal level have to make. And who am I to criticize them? I got a criminal organization that's moving product into the United States, but at least I don't have beheadings. Right. And dismembered bodies in front of a school that can traumatize children. That's like, who am I to criticize them for that?
Right. That's a good point.
If you lived where you're at and you're seeing bodies in the streets and you have a choice to pick, just let one criminal group run the show. Yeah. You know, are you wrong for doing that? I'm not going to say it. Even with corruption. So, you know, and it's funny because even Preston Stewart in one of the interviews is like, well, I guess there's like kind of this corruption where it's like, okay, do your thing, just don't do violence. I mean, that's technical corruption. Can we really hold them? And I was like, no, I agree. I mean, that's a decision that the Mexican government is going to have to make.
We've seen it in El Salvador where, like, I don't think people realize, like,
Bukele made a deal with, oh my God, let me just, he made a deal. He protects MS-13. Yeah. And I said, I'm not going to blame him for it.
Well, yeah. And that's the thing. Like, while he'll tout that they did it and it was all work, like, they had to go to MS-13 and say, look, we got to figure this out unilaterally. Like, so you do have to be corrupt, I guess, say, in one level. Would you, this is a question that I get a lot. I talk about this a lot. Would you willingly travel to Mexico anywhere?
Yeah. You would. Yeah. Like, look, well, this is what I tell people, because people ask me, look at the State Department travel guide for Mexico. Read it, study it, learn it, do what they say. As long as you follow that, you'll be good. You'll be good. I'll go to Mexico. I've been to Mexico since I've done All Source News. Do it.
Would you drive into Mexico?
I've drone into Mexico.
You wouldn't advise it, though.
I mean, there's a difference. Like, I speak the language. I know, I kind of go with the locals. I know where I'm going. Yeah. Like, I mean, willy-nilly, blindly driving. Like, okay. Like,
you're just saying, kind of do your research. Don't go
research. Don't be, and again, the travel guide. Actually, the State Department travel guide will tell you which highways not to go onto. And even sometimes they will tell you from what time to what time you should go onto this highway. They'll lay it out for you.
Let me ask
you. Use that as your guide.
Would you? That's a good. Here's a business idea for you. Be a consultant. people can reach out to you and say, I'm going here or going there. Would you do that? Like,
I mean, what I would say is like that's, I mean, in a way, Artorias, that's my company. That's kind of how we exist.
That could
I
be
mean, and that's part of the venue. We do have, I mean, Sit Rep is again for the general public. We do have more for corporate. That's kind of the vehicle that we also leverage, specifically Mexico, but around the world, where either violence, data feed, do we have economic, health news, you name it, and we do that. So yes, that's something that kind of Artorias in a way, one of the many services we do provide is consulting. I'm going to do that.
I'm going to link the app in the pinned comment, also your YouTube channel. Final question. It is 2025, as we know. In 2050, what do Mexican cartels look? Because if we go back 25 years from today, drug cartels, I mean, we hadn't really, they were.
It was the Colombians were the key one.
Yeah, they were a lot different.
If I would have to place a bet, if somebody replaces the Mexican cartels, the one I'm looking at is Brazilian gangs. I've said this multiple times. It would be the Brazilian gangs
and stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Red Commando, PCC, the Brazilian gangs. I have kind of like I track them and a kind of like over top level understanding and kind of the activities they've really exploded in Western Europe and Western Africa, and they're starting to increase their presence in South America. I think, it's kind of interesting, like MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. Like Tren de Aragua, the first time I publicly tweeted about them, even though I was tracking them for longer, was May 2023. Because for me, it was like, wait, if Chile is starting to sound the alarm about security because of Tren de Aragua, that's something we should be tracking about. But Tren de Aragua, at the end of the day, it doesn't have like the same level of gravitas and infrastructure of, let's say, these like the Brazilian gangs. Like they're very powerful and violent, don't get me wrong. Sure. But from like an international drug trafficking organization, just as the Mexicans with the Guadalajara cartel then became the powerful ones that supplanted the Colombian ones, in 2050, if I would have to say, if the Mexican cartels collapse or significantly weaken, they'll still be around. There'll be new groups out there. The one I'm specifically would be looking for is the Brazilian gangs. I think those would be the next focus internationally from a criminal point of view that we need to be focusing on.
I got one more and then we'll get you out of here.
Go for it.
10 years from now, is El Mencho still operating, in custody, or muerte?
Custody or muerte.
Okay. Like, I guess this is a kind of a question too.
And I don't think he's going to last 10 years.
Where does someone like that, like to that level, where do they live? Where are they? In the mountains somewhere?
No. Look at Osama bin Laden. He was living in Abbottabad, Pakistan.
I was just going to mention that. Where do you think he is?
He's probably in a compound somewhere in Mexico. They all are. Yeah. I mean, the Wall Street Journal published yesterday a great story of Ivan Archibaldo. He wasn't hiding anywhere. He was hiding in a house and he escaped via a tunnel.
Yeah, just.
Like we'd known about this already when it first happened. They found the tunnel because I remember when that raid happened, and we were all like, "Oh shit, is it Ivan? Is it Ivan?" And then they found the tunnel, and we're like, "That has to be Ivan.
Sure,
that has to be Ivan. That's not
Bentley's." A lot of ingenuity there.
Yeah, that tunnel, and then that was Ivan. But no, that's the same. I mean, I would assume. And Mencho's probably somewhere in a ranch in Jalisco or in a kind of like a nicer house inside of a major urban city, even or in a ranch in a remote area, something like that. And he probably bounces around and moves around. Yeah. But like, either an isolated, but it's not like in the mountains or something like that. It's a nice area. Like I don't see these guys living.
I would love to ask any of these guys, when it's all said and done, was it worth it? Like, was all this, was it all?
Hey, if you get the scoop with the Chapo, let me know. If you get the scoop with the Chapo, let me know.
Well, I'll talk to you off the air. Maybe I have something on another person we talked about here. But okay, All Source News. That's how I know you. You're one of the better follows that you can find. Artorias Tech. I'm gonna download it right after I get off here. Everybody, check out the YouTube channel. I'm gonna put it in the pinned comment. I really appreciate you coming on. Maybe we'll try to do this every couple of months. There's always something going on in the world of drug cartels and organized crime. I'm glad you do it. You do it on a much higher level than I do, but it's a very interesting world, and I'm glad that you're doing it.
I appreciate it so much, Jeff. It was great, and I hope to be back soon.
You got it. And just hang on. I'm going to end it, and we'll talk after the stream. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next week here on the Sit Down.